Hello, everyone. This is the Aquamarine Cup, the Newcomers League part of it. This is round 1, Group C, here with Amranu, Fallout CT, Mr. Fantastic, and DuckDuck. And we have... apparently, we have Jupiter's Forge HQs enabled. It's interesting. Anyway, this is a power colony. Regular power starting price, but double silicon, chems, and water. What are we looking at for founds? Carbon's pretty weak this game. This is workable carbon, but it's miles away from water, so it will be difficult to make work. Where's all the iron? Iron's mostly in this corner. You can make something work pretty easily. Inexpansive or scientific would be less desirable, but expansives work pretty well northwest. Elites are harder. There is no iron that's particularly close to silicon. And let's see what players decided on. We have expansive here. Next to the aluminum is nice. A little farther away from the iron, but that is workable. Scientific here, going for high iron, medium aluminum, and something. We will see. Not really taking advantage of the scientific benefit of being able to just use the iron as force steel without mining, although there's silver. And also not really taking advantage of adjacency. All these buildings are going to be producing significantly less than if we had adjacent buildings of the same type, but that is okay for the moment. Amranu doing pretty standard stuff, skipping aluminum on HQ1, but is able to buy up the 80, so be fine there. And just pulling in the iron, making steel. Mr. Fantastic and DuckDuck over here competing over this crater. It's going to be pretty awkward. Mr. Fantastic manages to secure most of the good resources, pulling in good water, good aluminum, good carbon. I am concerned about taking this much water this quickly. Water did start high, so it'll be okay for the moment. Glass is low enough that this should be enough to carry Mr. Fantastic through to HQ3. And fuel did start low, so even though the transport costs are going to be painful over time, they aren't going to kill him too quickly. DuckDuck, on the other hand, stuck on pretty weak carbon, just the one medium. Put up a wind turbine, and still deciding what to do with the last claim. Again, not really taking advantage of adjacency the way you need to in this game, and power at HQ1, especially with a single building commitment, is always going to be a bit of a dicey proposition. It's just not producing very much, and it's not all that cheap to put up either. Either way, Fallout CT is now on HQ2. Started pulling in some water, getting a second iron mine up. Iron is not worth very much and really need to see some steel, because that's getting up there and making production pretty difficult. It's reasonable to use the high water like this to supply life support next to your base while you don't have teleportation or anything of the sort. It's definitely not what he's going to want to do long term, but it works for the moment. It works less well because this has no adjacency, but we'll see how that all plays out. Amranu first to, well, second to 3 actually. Mr. Fantastic getting there first. Strong chem production. Again, this is where it starts to be concerning. Fuel has already crept up to 60. This is going to continue consuming a ton of fuel, and the chems add up on top of that. Even though this carbon's okay, it's only 3.75 per second, especially with the chem production, that's going to be hard to keep up with upgrading at a reasonable speed. 32k for this tile is concerning. Fallout CT was making power money, even off the single turbine. It probably wasn't going to be much money or for long, but it's just a little less income now, and this tile doesn't really do anything at the moment. I guess aluminum's reasonably priced still, so it's not nothing, but it's going to take a while to come online and ship in stuff. By that time, Fallout CT probably could be at HQ3 if you really wanted more aluminum. Just connect this up with more mines and be fine there. Amranu going, okay. That's a geotherm next to the 2 water tiles. That is fine. Reactors doing a lot of good work there. Just pretty solidly set up overall. It is interesting to me that no one in this game has gone for food, but given all the shipping distances for all the players, reactors does make a fair amount of sense. Pirating water doesn't do much, but it is still more effective than this mutiny. Generally, mutinies on single production buildings don't get very much done just because you don't have the adjacency, and also for Mr. Fantastic, he has to ship water all the way out to this reactor before it starts producing anything, and then stuff has to ship all the way back. So it's a long amount of time on this mutiny that nothing's actually happening. I also just need to switch some options because that's important to me. Okay. Yeah. Just being able to see how long that stuff is going to last is very useful. Right, Imranu getting to HQ4 pretty cleanly, moving into food. Going to have that market all to themselves, making a lot of money off of that, especially as water stays cheap. Doesn't quite have enough water to cover costs, but it's not looking like that's going to be a problem. So we have a slant drilling auction. Imranu, I think, would like that a lot just to cover water pretty easily, but it is only 1 tile there, so it's something you can live without. Fallout CT, I'm not really sure what use you'd be looking for out of slant drilling, so in some ways should feel lucky that Imranu outbid him for it. But yeah. Okay, Mr. Fantastic picks up teleportation. Did build this patent lab at the colony a while back. Effort to rush that out. It is going to be very useful for dealing with this water situation, and also just because it's really cramped in this crater, and already having to expand outside of it somewhat, this is going to make that a lot less painful, especially with these pirates on the map that were doing some work there. Oof, that pirate sound. Okay, so tuck over here. Ooh, okay. Right, so this is going back to the same point we've been making before. Adjacency is a big deal. Even though both these turbines are very strong, you're producing a total of 2 power per second off of them. But even though like this individual spot would be weaker, it would only produce 0.8 power per second on its own. With the adjacency bonus, you'd be producing a total of 2.7 power instead of the 2 power, which is significantly more, and it doesn't really cost you anything to do things like that. Right, so just in general, you do not want to diversify your production too much at the beginning. You want to be able to use your adjacency bonuses. Eventually, you can look to diversify, but triangles, pairs, very good early on. Another mutiny on to a farm over here. Who was it this time? I cannot see that. Well, it did happen 100 plus seconds ago, so I'd have to go pretty far up for it. But either way, same sort of issue applies there. You never really want to be mutinying single production buildings. In this case, it did open up like lanes for pirates or something to be active since it disconnected the food from the base. And also in race situations, disconnection can mean that your opponent's a bit slower to get their money in, but those are pretty marginal cases, and in general I would advise against that. Alright, water engines coming out. Fuel price has come down a lot recently. No surprise with so many reactors on the map and with the biggest fuel consumer picking up teleportation. Means that water engine's not going to be worth a lot. And probably should not be bid on a lot. Especially for Mr. Fantastic. Already in B debt here. B debt is very manageable and is still staying in B even with the auction, but this is a patent that does next to no good for Mr. Fantastic, and it's a significant chunk of debt to take on. Hello, Layla. Alright. Mr. Fantastic is now switching into food here, which still does make a lot of sense, especially without needing to consume fuel himself. Just having extra food production when the market is that strong is nice. I am concerned about this single reactor that's left down there, but it's not the end of the world. Alright. Yeah, here we're still seeing just the downside to playing scientific and not really being able to use or not using your advantages properly. Just if this was steel, he would have had a lot more income than like this 1,700 iron is worth next to nothing and isn't helping him upgrade. Whereas steel is just making a lot, would be making a lot of money. It's all a bit unfortunate there. Amranu is solidly in the lead. Lots of money. HQ5 first, has the patent lab, has the optimization center. Big issue there is the debt. That is something that could be worked on. Doesn't quite have enough money to pay off out of D debt, but yeah, that goes. Right, so this position is built a lot off of just being the strongest found probably this game. Everything is set up nice and close. Don't have to do things like rush teleportation the way Mr. Fantastic did. Just strong Amranu, also just making good use of adjacency and getting things done in a good order. But the opponents, with Mr. Fantastic, Fallout CT in particular, doing a lot of freezes and dynamites, mutinies on these buildings has been very disruptive. That freezes on the food in particular are part of what's contributed to this high amount of debt, and that does still loom as a weakness. So Mr. Fantastic has gone and set up some pleasure domes. Where is the second pleasure dome? Tells me there are two pleasure domes. That's confusing. Okay, it's getting built right here. That's why. Okay. Yeah, these pleasure domes are amazing. Not surprising. 2 scavengers and expansive in the game. Yeah, Duck Tuck over here is also just looking to get bought out very soon. Again, just not in a great place based on the found contested carbon, and then like not making use of the adjacency in those places has just been very painful. It's never quite being able to make money, like a lot of this covering debt. And it just been a slow, painful climb there. In general, just 1.5 carbon per second is not going to be anywhere near enough for a scavenger. With the large amounts they need to upgrade and everything, we're probably looking at something like 3.75 at a minimum to feel decent about it. But in any case, looks like Mr. Fantastic has backed off within the aggression there, either sensing a better opportunity pushing up here. The main competition is just going to be between the two of them, Amranu and Mr. Fantastic here. And we'll see how that plays out. What do optimizations look like? Just a couple into chems, which are definitely solid. But Also less than you might expect for how long Emrano has had the optimization center up, and part of that's because, well, the dynamite. Patent-wise, Mr. Fantastic does have a nice edge in income from these pleasure domes, with the virtual reality doing a lot of work for him. And the teleportation with this fuel price is also helping a lot. Carbon scrubbing is definitely helpful for Emrano. Slant drilling definitely was a nice pickup in the auction. Probably not for the 40k though. Talked about it earlier, this is really the only tile that is significantly affected by the slant drilling. And 40k debt is just a lot to ask. It's a large part of why this has been consistently a problem, in addition to the freezes on the food. So we'll have to see where Emranu's really looking to pick up the income to finish out this game. Because while the production is strong at the moment, it's definitely questionable whether or not that's enough to outrace Mr. Fantastic, who just has a tremendous lead in this particular race. And part of that does have to do with the situation with Fallout CT. Just all that money invested into there is just not paying off. Part that's not really surprising. There are a lot of far-flung claims with the high fuel price and just a kind of weak base. It was always going to be difficult for it to pay off effectively. It is interesting that the sub-AI is not getting out of these mines for steel, and I do believe that is just generally one of its weaknesses. Like, there's a large bias towards sticking to buildings with no input costs if they're already down. So DuckDuck over here has just gotten bought out. Then no surprise there. Like, we knew he was struggling a bit with the way things were set up. So it was kind of inevitable that would happen this game, but just a matter of when the players would want to direct their attention that way. I do kind of wonder if it was the right move to do that though, because that is a lot of money that Mr. Fantastic has invested in there, and it will be a while before that pays off. Meanwhile, Emrano is kind of starting to stabilize here, starting to, just get out of that D range of debt. And any amount of time you're giving here kind of opens up opportunities for him to potentially get back into this game. Of course, with these dust storms that keep coming, all these food optimizations and stuff aren't really going to pay off as much as Emrano would like, but it will still be nice. Mr. Fantastic's production, on the other hand, is kind of struggling right now. Reactors are still doing okay, but not amazingly. The water is still doing nicely, but the glass is also starting to struggle with the silicon price. Mr. Fantastic does not have access to silicon, and that will be problematic. And these farms will be nice, but they're also going to come down right as the dust storm starts, so they're not even really going to be profitable either. Mr. Fantastic really probably needs to be looking into optimizations or something to just keep this production more competitive with Emranu's. Emrano is starting to catch up a lot just based off of the more efficient production, even without the Pleasure Dome income, which is definitely significant. There's a real race here. Okay, Emranu's starting to move into an off-world. Off-world's always a nice tool to try to push towards the end of the game if you can afford to put one up. Definitely easier to use, less volatile than trying to use a hacker array or optimizations, and it should pay off nicely. The black market is still pretty cheap in this game, but this is under a hologram and a goon squad, Might be somewhat hard for Mr. Fantastic to find. We'll see how that works out. One thing to watch is that this is an oxygen launch, so that price should be rising pretty quickly. Oxygen being significantly harder to produce than the other life support types for the most part. This surplus will definitely help with this launch staying cheap. But yeah, otherwise, like you definitely want to be preparing for the price to rise with some optimizations beforehand, and that hasn't really happened yet, which is okay. Food is high enough that for the moment, like this price difference is just so huge. It's fine to be short-term about it. Alright, Mr. Fantastic with 4 claims open. Let's see what he tries to do with that. Okay, off-world market starting to come down. Over at the colony. Optimization center also starting to run. Optimizing water first is something. He's producing a lot of water. It's going to be a big immediate benefit. It doesn't really hold up to something like optimizing food long term, but it's also not terrible. I definitely wouldn't advise optimizing it fully. For HQs besides the elite, basically every step you're optimizing costs a significant amount more time and chemicals. And the payoff is the same throughout, just 25% per step. So just diminishing returns, whereas you can start just getting cheap 25% into a bunch of things more quickly, and that's more likely to pay off, and also just less risky. Once you fully optimize water, then once that market crashes out, it's kind of a wasted set of optimizations. In any case, okay, so we have the mutiny down onto the patent lab, another hologrammed gooned off-world there. And this is looking pretty close. Mr. Fantastic does have a slight edge in terms of stock price, and a slight edge in current money. But Amranu does have the better optimizations. So we'll see how that works out. Sub-income is still largely irrelevant. It's not producing a lot for either player. And Fallout CT's upgrade just now really doesn't help with that. The subs upgrade, the AI's upgrade, you know. One thing I would want to point out for Amranu is add the option of connecting up this iron. Just it would free up the iron tiles to be used for something else later, instead of just having this keep getting stockpiled while it's worthless, and it would also just save on the fuel costs. So that is something to watch out for. When you have the opportunity to connect things like that, it is often worthwhile. Okay, that's interesting actually. Mr. Fantastic drops the spy right there, so he doesn't actually find the off-world market, but has managed to drop a power surge there, finding the Goon Squad. We'll see if Mr. Fantastic uses that information as a hint that there might be something in that tile, or just assumes otherwise. It is also regooned, and there probably isn't enough time to punch through again, so we probably won't find out how that all resolves. Still a very, very close race here. Alright. More black market getting dropped, and that does suggest that Mr. Fantastic knows. Curious how Imranu is going to respond to that. This 50k green squad is an option, and it might just be the right option. Even though it sets him back a lot, it also protects against this really cheap dynamite, which would just end things. It is definitely a question. Because yeah, if Mr. Fantastic can get this hit off there, then it is pretty much that. Mutiny Goon. That is not a trick I expected to see here. But it worked out fabulously for Mr. Fantastic, and he should just be able to clean this game up off of that. Next launch will get him into enough money, and Imranu doesn't have anything that can keep up with that with the off-world gone. Although, if Mr. Fantastic doesn't notice the buyout, Imranu can creep there before this 14 seconds is up. Oh. Wait, what? There's a weird mutiny there. But I guess that's fine. Mr. Fantastic just had it. Right, so well played by him. Definitely good use of the black market to help keep things closer when Imranu was looking to threaten to take a huge lead. Also helped by Fallout CT contributing to that black market effort, and also Imranu probably getting a bit of the worse end of buying out Fallout CT, just spending a bit more in the moment when it might have been better to try to invest more in themselves. Basically, at D+1 debt, if you're spending that's something like 100k to get the buyout done, could have dealt with the debt, could have gone for more optimizations or research of some sort, and that probably would have paid off better. Eventually, Fallout CT got to be a very nice sub, but it took many souls, and yeah, that's just costlier than it needed to be.